Muted? Yep. Great. Now we can head back to the Zoom. Perfect. And the last thing is to decide how you like that angle. There's nothing more to do. To read.
Venerable.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, Venerable.
We'll get started in just another few minutes. Just open the YouTube stream, so let people kind of find that. Doesn't show up until it started. We'll wait just one more minute, and we'll get started right at 9 o'clock. trust you. Apparently it's 9:01. Welcome, everybody. We're going to begin a morning session for the retreat. Whether you're tuning in live or you're catching this with a bit of a delay because of your time zone. The morning is a time squeezed between activities, squeezed between meals, squeezed between, it's a time when we have the most energy to do projects. So it's a tricky time to sit down and be still and internally calm, but it can also be a very rich time because the mind is potentially very awake. So we're going to take advantage of this. The first part of this session, I'll be describing the next level of samadhi, or the next level of developing samadhi. And we'll sit for about 45 minutes total. And then we'll do a half hour of walking meditation. And we'll come back to round it out with another 45-minute sit. And this will make for a very, very good little morning session. As we're settling, we're preparing to meditate, just to review, how are we doing? Are we comfortable? Did we rush to the cushion? Did we get there at the last minute? Was there a lot of activity in the break period? How does our body feel? And what is our approach to sitting? So again, this is step 0, just assessing the qualities of mind, the first 7 path factors, like what are we working with when we're sitting down, and how willing are we to meditate? So if we're not even willing to meditate, or we've rushed to get to the cushion so that we can start calming down, then we've already got some work to do before we can begin cultivating peace of mind. Well, I got some things to let go of, some dust to let settle. And this is the first thing we have to do is look for the hindrances. Do you want to be here? Do you want to be meditating? Or did you make a commitment and so you're sitting? Well, that's fine. Sitting is the condition for developing samadhi, but that need to have the determination in the face of the hindrances just points to the fact that the hindrances are there. So we're going to sit first and feel what's going on in the body and mind, and start to listen and let the narrative kind of drop away. Start to take an interest in our surroundings, in the feeling of our body, in the atmosphere, in the sounds around us. Find something that gives us a real touchstone to being here in this moment. And it's totally okay if this requires more than just a quick effort. In fact, it's to our benefit if we really make sure we're ready before we begin trying to use any technique. Because if the hindrances are present, then any technique is going to be a diluted effort. We're going to be working against ourselves the whole time. Now, supposing though we do sit down, or we do arrive at the time and place of meditation, and we're here, or it just takes a little bit of effort, and we're starting to feel comfortable. We're ready to practice meditation. The mind is workable. Then in this case, we might find that there's a sort of juncture now. We may be like, great, the hindrances have calmed down. Now I can scan the body. Now I can do vipassana. Now I can contemplate this. Now I can practice metta. I had this upset the other day. Now I can figure out what might have been the root cause. And that's all well and good. And we don't necessarily do just samadhi practice when we're on the cushion. But at this particular juncture, what we're going to do, since we've set aside this weekend to really ground ourselves in the fundamentals and make some progress and development of our samadhi, which is progressive, is sequential. We're going to notice that impulse that says, okay, great, I can think. Now I'm going to start to do this other thing. Now I'm going to start to plan for a trip. Now I'm going to start to develop these positive qualities of the heart. Now I'm going to understand anicca. We're going to catch those thoughts the same as we would catch any thoughts, same as we would catch the hindrances. Because these will be a sort of subtle hindrance. They're attractive objects, but they're objects that take us away from the development of samadhi and composure of mind. We basically, I'm giving you the advice to just chill. And that's actually pretty hard for most people to do. Most people hit the cushion, they want to get something done. When it comes to a project, it's good to have a goal, an end goal where we know the project is done. When we've got a journey, it's good to have a destination. But happiness is the exact opposite. Happiness is the departure from where we are right now. Happiness is the having work that is the opposite of having work that has to be done. So it's like you leave happiness. You get too busy to be happy. So a goal orientation doesn't work with samadhi. We've got to let ourselves be happy. We've got to give ourselves permission to have samadhi. And that will help us get comfortable in our own skin. And when we sense that we are, as I said, it's a particular turning off of the hindrances. It'll be like we were in a room with a bunch of people there, and because they had always been there, we never necessarily noticed. They were talking, they were moving around, they were shifting stuff, they were taking our stuff and putting it in different places, they were making us do things. But then by not attending to them, by not feeding them, by not giving them a place to sit down, at some point they're all gone. And now this may be an amazing experience for many people. The hindrances are now gone, but you'll notice it's like the room has cleared out. The room is empty. And for some people, they're like, well, now what? It's very obvious when the hindrances are saying, look at that, do this, avoid that. Then you look at that, you do this, you avoid that. But when there's nobody calling out what to do next, what do you do? Well, that's already the experience the Buddha called the experience of Nibbana here and now. This is where we start in samadhi practice. That's step 0. And every step of samadhi as we develop is making that more stable, is getting us further and further from the hindrances, which will take that experience of Nibbana from us. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha, he gives the next step or the first step, depending on how you look at it. So the meditator has established mindfulness, and the Buddha says, breathing in long, they know I'm breathing in long. Breathing out long, they know I'm breathing out long. So the first two steps of the Anapanasati Sutta are establishing this dichotomy of long breaths and short breaths. And entire volumes have been written about what these mean. And in some ways, the Buddha is a genius because it's given monks a livelihood for 2,500 years to interpret these in new and interesting ways. There's no one concrete definition. So I'm going to provide a way of looking at these instructions that will point to certain developmental stages that need to happen for samadhi to develop and get strong. But you may find that certain teachers are kind of shifting the orders of them based on their interpretation of how things develop. But that the same qualities of samadhi will develop no matter who is teaching it. So what we may find once the hindrances go quiet, we're now able to get a basic sense of mindfulness, of that we're aware. But it may be not necessarily very focused. We may be just kind of vaguely aware that we're mindful, that we're aware that we're here. And then we'll get a feeling in our knee, and then we're aware of the feeling in our knee, but then it'll get a bit nebulous. And we'll have a thought, and we're aware of the thought, and then there's something in between. And so the first step in the Anapanasati Sutta, the first step in developing samadhi, is to not fall out of this first step. So to notice if we become distracted, to notice if the hindrances are trying to take us back out of the process of meditation, and just catching them if they do. But in order to keep them at bay, we're going to start to develop mindfulness of the fact that we are breathing. Many people will, in the first stage, they'll try to find a way to experience a sensation of the breath. And you may or may not be able to do that. And so it's important to know that in the first step, you don't necessarily need to be having breath sensations. You don't necessarily need to be able to feel the breath at any particular point in the body. Because just trying to make that happen will disrupt the calm of the mind. It'll be a forceful effort. It'll come from a sense of lack. But samadhi begins from a sense of presence and contentment. So instead of looking for a particular sensation, what we're going to do is try to anchor the mind in the knowledge that we are breathing. And there are three general places where we might start to let the mind gravitate towards. And one is in the area of the nose, and one is the rise and fall of the chest, and one is the rise and fall of the belly. But now we're not looking for exact sensations. Instead, what we're doing is we're adding the idea of continuous mindfulness of the fact that we're breathing in that area. And this is to a point or for a purpose. That purpose is the main hindrance in step one, is that we're going to have a more intense sensation somewhere else, and the mind is going to want to focus on that. So it doesn't matter whether we choose the nose or the chest or the belly, but it does matter that if we're choosing one of these areas, that we notice when the mind is drawn away from it. And that's what we're trying to catch in step one. We're trying to wean the mind off of this idea that it should focus on the most intense sensation that we're experiencing in any given moment. Instead, we're going to be totally okay with whatever sensation we've got. We're not even looking for a sensation. What we're developing is the continuity, the knowledge, like paying attention to the breath in this area. It doesn't even have to be like super focused, or in this area, just whatever the breath might mean in that area, or the belly. And so we might be able to sense that. And it's hard to describe, it's hard to point to, but yet we know, like, yeah, okay, I'm not getting lost, but things will happen, and there'll be a temptation to focus on them. Like in this stage, maybe if we took an object like this bell, and say we decided to put our finger on the bell, and we said, no matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep my finger on the bell. And so we can cook a meal, we can have a cup of coffee, we can shave. We might even need to switch hands, wash something, just as long as we keep a point of contact on the bell, even if we need to use a different appendage or a knee. Yeah. And that's a lot like what we're doing right now. We're trying to keep a particular area known to the mind, even when something else is going on. And the more that we're successful with this, the easier it's going to become. The more we're going to notice multiple things can happen, and we don't lose our object of mindfulness. We don't lose that location we've decided on. So I take it that the Buddha is describing this stage in relation to the long breath. It's in relation to deep breaths, which will move the entire body. And when we breathe deeply, we become very aware of any stuck energies, any resistance in the body, any places where we're still holding on, or where we're flinching against a pain or an expected pain. Even to some level where we're experiencing a comfortable or pleasant sensation, and our mind wants to keep going to it and build it up and make more of it. So this stage can also be thought of as the effort to let the body breathe on its own. Let it breathe deeply, and let it breathe fully. And this can only happen if we don't add or subtract anything to the process of breathing. If we just stay with the general location that we've set up and develop our mindfulness there, the mind and the breath body will become stuck if, when we have a strong sensation somewhere, our mind goes to that. But if we stay here, even if we're aware of that sensation, it doesn't get larger. It doesn't have any more hold on the mind. It actually gets worked back into the breath body. And then we'll have another sensation. It'll get worked back into the breath body. So the more we can stay with the mindfulness, the more the body will be able to continue relaxing as it has been through step 0. The Buddha likened this to the crossroads of 4 roads, just dirt roads. And he said, it's like you've got a mound of dirt in the middle of this intersection. He said, whether carts are coming from the north or the south or the east or the west, they would ride over this bump. And over time, it would get flattened down until it was indiscernible. And when the Buddha used this simile, he was talking about the breath. He was talking about this step of the long breath. So we have like lumps and coarse bodily sensations in our body. And the breath is constantly moving across them. Now, if we make stories or we resist this process, if we focus too much on the lumps, it's like going around them, or it's like stopping in front of them. But if we just let the breath wash over them, then gradually, whether the breath is going down or going up or going left or going right, it will start to smooth those coarse sensations down. And the body will become more relaxed and balanced and even, because it'll be able to breathe. It'll be able to breathe around the sensations that we're experiencing. It's important to know that we're not focusing on the sensations themselves. We don't need to hit any pockets of resistance. We're not trying to knead the knots out of our body like a baker kneads bread dough. The breath is already doing it. Our whole task will just be to maintain mindfulness, to choose an area and try to establish again an intention to meditate, to stay with it. This is one of the major stumbling blocks in the development of samadhi, is that people don't stay with this stage and appreciate that they don't necessarily need to be having any intense experience. This is the opposite of a goal orientation. The more you can let go of goals, the more successful you're going to be in this, because you'll just let the body and the breath do what they need to do, and the mind will become stronger for it. So the last thing I might say about this stage as it develops is, number one, you're going to have moments of it, and then you're gonna kind of drop back. You're gonna experience distractions. That's very normal. But two, there's something in our goal orientation. So we might label this as step one. We might say, okay, in this sitting, I intend to get to step 4 or step 5. We might sit down and want to do all 16 steps of breath meditation. Or we might be compartmentalizing. We might say, well, I'm going to do this for 15 minutes, and then I'll do half an hour of something else. And all of these can be a sort of restlessness that will slow down our development by creating limits and boundaries on our experience. So in terms of a goal orientation, when we're sitting, we're not sitting in developing samadhi to get through any number of steps. Our goal instead should be in the present moment. And so the goal I'd like to suggest is to have one perfect breath. It is an attainable goal. And a goal, even if you attain it, you're going to be encouraged to have another perfect breath. But if you don't attain it, you know you're right within reach of what you're trying to accomplish. A perfect breath is not a breath where there are no sensations, but it's a breath where there is no resistance, and where the mind doesn't leave its center point. So this is our task as we sit here, a joyful task, to have one perfect breath without the tiniest drop of resistance, able to experience what is happening, to be interested in what is happening, and to let it flow. And if we can arrive at that orientation, then we'll find that for longer and longer periods, our mind becomes really confident in having a touchstone, a touch point, a reference point with wherever we've decided to pay attention and be mindful of the breath. And that's what we want. That's our success in this stage. To get to the point where our mind is not going to leave to chase after the breath or sensations anywhere else, where other things might happen, but our mindfulness stays where we've decided. Continue sitting with these thoughts, this intention of having a perfect breath. you've ever been on a meditation retreat before, you're probably aware that it's just pretty much not humanly possible to spend 12 hours in the sitting posture unless you're already in deep, deep samadhi. But the Buddha didn't recommend even trying. What he recommended was alternating between sitting and walking, that this will conduce to the health of the body and the brightness of the mind. He also encouraged walking meditation because he said the samadhi that you attain in walking meditation will last a long time. So it's a particular quality of samadhi if we can achieve it in the midst of outward activity. So to say a few things about walking meditation, and also by extension, all other meditation techniques, is though these instructions kind of pinpoint mindfulness of breathing, the development of samadhi is the same. Even if we're doing metta, even if we're doing walking meditation, we're doing mindfulness of the body or mindfulness of the death, all of these will develop samadhi in the same way. Now, we may be doing them for some other purpose. We may be trying to have some particular kind of insight. But if we're allowing ourselves to develop samadhi, which is a path factor, a factor for the development of the Eightfold Path, then it's going to follow this natural progression. There's going to be dealing with the hindrances, getting them to shut up, and then developing mindfulness gradually until it becomes strong enough that it can resist anything that the hindrances might arise and throw at us. So in walking meditation, step one is very relevant because we're going to have all sorts of coarse bodily sensations and coarse sensory impacts. So the Buddha, in talking about the development of samadhi, he also, in what's called the gradual training, he highlights some other things that help bring about samadhi, one of which is sila. So we're we've got that by keeping the precepts and trying our best while we're on the walking path. We probably won't have too many opportunities to kill or steal or cheat or lie if we're just walking back and forth on a path. But if we can keep our sila, then that'll help us. And the next is sense restraint. And so sense restraint isn't necessarily putting on blinders. Sense restraint is actually this exact step one that we're doing. It means we're going to decide on a certain field of mindfulness, and we're going to catch ourselves whenever we're being pulled to pay attention to something else. At the very least, we want to have the two things exist simultaneously. Like we're like, oh, that was a loud noise, but we don't take our finger off our place of mindfulness. So walking meditation, because we know we're not going to be able to experience subtle breath sensations while we're moving about. We're just taking an area on the body. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same area as we're trying to focus on with the breath. I usually use general regions of the body. The most traditional is to use the soles of the feet. Personally, that comes and goes for me because it's actually two things moving differently. I actually like to try to focus on one thing, such as the pelvis or the collarbone, the sort of yoke of the shoulders. And for me, I can very easily pay attention to that as it moves through space as one thing. And it becomes actually quite interesting. You can actually start to develop the stages of samadhi and get to stage 2 and stage 3 in this exact way without even being on the cushion. So as we go about our walking meditation, go and find a place in the woods, a place without people coming and going. Try to give yourself a path, between 20 and 30 paces, so you can at least get a little bit of a stride. The pace you move doesn't necessarily matter. But just choose an area and try this. Try to first, is your mind trying to be somewhere else? But then once you're there on the walking path and you're not trying to deal with the hindrances, you're not trying to get away from it, then have an area that you're focusing your mindfulness towards. You're trying to keep that in mind no matter what's going on, and see if you can make that mindfulness continuous. See if you can get it strong enough that it resists sudden interruptions or sudden distractions. And if so, when you come back to the cushion, the mind has already got some samadhi. You might change the place where you're trying to be mindful of. You might change the object you're trying to be mindful of. But samadhi is not dependent on the object. It's a quality of mind. It's a path factor. So you'll be able to make use of the samadhi you've developed on the walking path when you get back to the cushion. Okay. So we're going to we'll take half an hour. So at 10:20, we'll come back and we'll round out the hour and we'll sit into 11. So for the next half hour, we'll do walking meditation. You can mute it, but leave the camera on. All right. So friends I can see joining from the Eastern and Central time zones. This is a good time for us here in person to have lunch. And again, if you've been on meditation retreat, you've heard the instruction, try to keep your mindfulness through the process of eating and don't toss it all away. I'm not going to go so far as to suggest that you should try to hold your meditation object while you're eating. I would rather suggest, in this case, try to eat in a way that's comfortable. Try to develop an ease while you eat. And just some suggestions would be to take your food and to kind of get it all on the plate or in the bowl, and then go off and sit somewhere comfortable, somewhere you can be relaxed and you won't be forced to interact. It's sort of the opposite of like a retreat center environment where you're going to have to go into, take your food and then you got to sit down and you got to do all these reflections and chants and you got to eat very, very mindfully. I don't know, go somewhere, sit in the sun, breathe. Just enjoy eating so that when you get done, there's no need to go back for more, that you just feel complete. And this will be a condition so that when you come back, you've still got that ease of body and mind. That's a fantastic support for the development of samadhi that helps you get past stage 0 and get back to doing the technique. But if you've generated any tension or any clinging, then that's something that has to be worked through. So to try to approach the next 2 hours in a relaxed way. We'll come back at 1 o'clock, but it'll be fairly open-ended. So I suggest after the meal for the 1 to 3 session is it to take it in half-hour segments. So sit for a half hour, walk for a half hour, or walk for a half hour, sit for a half hour. Decide for yourself at 1 o'clock what posture you want to start in. Do it for a half hour and then alternate. You're going to have hindrances. It's going to be midday, probably summer, going to be hot. Your belly will be full. So again, try not to develop any strain. The more you can be relaxed with the process, you can really just appreciate, oh, I've eaten. The hardest part of the day is done. I just flow with this. Yeah? And then we'll try to arrange it so that we gather back here at 3, and that's when I'll give the next block of instruction, and then we'll continue until 5. Okay. All right. So please enjoy your lunch. I want to silence the microphone for a second.